A shofar, pronounced ofa, is a musical instrument of ancient origin, made of a horn, traditionally that of a ram, used for Jewish religious purposes. Like the modern bugle, the shofar lacks pitch-altering devices. All pitch control is done by varying the player's embouchure. The shofar is blown in synagogue services on Rosh Hashanah and at the very end of Yom Kippur, and is also blown every weekday morning in the month of Elul running up to Rosh Hashanah. Shofars come in a variety of sizes and shapes, depending on the choice of animal and level of finish. Bible and rabbinic literature. The shofar is mentioned frequently in the Hebrew Bible, the Talmud and rabbinic literature. The blast of a shofar emanating from the thick cloud on Mount Sinai made the Israelites tremble in awe. The shofar was used to announce holidays, and the Jubilee year. The first day of the seventh month is termed a memorial of blowing, or a day of blowing, the shofar. They were for signifying the start of a war. Later, it was also employed in processions, as musical accompaniment, and eventually it was inserted into the temple orchestra by David. Note that the trumpets described in Numbers chapter 10 are a different instrument, described by the Hebrew word trumpet, not the word for shofar. The Torah describes the first day of the seventh month as a Zikron Teruah and as a Yom Teruah. This was interpreted by the Jewish sages as referring to the sounding of the shofar. In the temple in Jerusalem, the shofar was sometimes used together with the trumpet. On New Year's Day, the principal ceremony was conducted with the shofar, which instrument was placed in the center with a trumpet on either side. It was the horn of a wild goat and straight in shape, being ornamented with gold at the mouthpiece. On fast days, the principal ceremony was conducted with the trumpets in the center and with a shofar on either side. On those occasions, the shofaret were ram's horns curved in shape and ornamented with silver at the mouthpieces. On Yom Kippur of the Jubilee year, the ceremony was performed with the shofar as on New Year's Day, on Rosh Hashanah, and other full holidays. Passover and the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, a single priest perfected 2 sacrifices in honor of the full holiday. On Rosh Hashanah, something special occurred during the special sacrifice. Arguably 2 shofar sounders played the long notes and 1 trumpet player played the short note. Accordingly, Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Teruah, otherwise, the trumpets had top billing. Rosh Hashanah 27a supports this claim. Said Rabbah, or it may have been Joshua b. Levi. What is the scriptural warrant for this? Because it is written, with trumpets and the sound of the shofar shout ye before the king in the temple. We require trumpets and the sound of the shofar, elsewhere not. Indeed, on Yom Kippur, the shofar was sounded to announce the Jubilee year. Indeed, in Rosh Hashanah 33b, the sages ask why the shofar sounded in Jubilee year. Further support is found in Rosh Hashanah 29a, indicating the sounding of both shofars and trumpets. On Jubilee year, however, only the shofar blasts. The rabbis created the practice of the shofars sounding every Yom Kippur rather than just on the Jubilee year. Otherwise, for all other special days, the shofar is sounded shorter and 2 special silver trumpets announce the sacrifice. When the trumpets sound the signal, all the people who were within the sacrifice prostrate themselves, stretching out flat, face down and on the ground. The shofar was blown in the times of Joshua chapter 5 to help him capture Jericho. As they surrounded the walls, the shofar was blown and the Jews were able to capture the city. The shofar was commonly taken out to war so the troops would know when a battle would begin. The person who would blow the shofar would call out to the troops from atop a hill. All of the troops were able to hear the call of the shofar from their position because of its distinct sound. Post-biblical times, at the inception of the diaspora, during the short-lived ban on playing musical instruments, the shofar was enhanced in its use as a sign of mourning for the destruction of the temple. The declaration of the ban's source was in fact set to music itself as the lamentation, Al-Naharoth Bavel. Within a few centuries of the ban, the shofar continues to announce the Jewish year, and the sighting of the new moon, to introduce Shabbat. to carry out the commandment to sound it on Rosh Hashanah, and to mark the end of the day of fasting on Yom Kippur. Once the services have been completed in the evening, secular uses have been discarded. The shofar is primarily associated with Rosh Hashanah. Indeed, Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Teruah. In the Mishnah, a discussion centers on the primacy of the shofar in the time before the destruction of the Second Temple. Indeed, the shofar was the center of the ceremony, with 2 silver trumpets playing a lesser role. On other solemn holidays, fasts, and new moon celebrations, 2 silver trumpets were featured, with 1 shofar playing a lesser role. The shofar is also associated with the Jubilee year, in which, every 50 years, Jewish law provided for the release of all slaves, land, and debts. The sound of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah announced the Jubilee year, and the sound of the shofar on Yom Kippur proclaimed the actual release of financial encumbrances. The Halakha rules that the shofar may not be sounded on Shabbat, due to the potential that the Baal Tekiah may inadvertently carry it, which is in a class of forbidden Shabbat work. The historical explanation is that, in ancient Israel, the shofar was sounded on Shabbat in the temple located in Jerusalem. After the temple's destruction, the sounding of the shofar on Shabbat was restricted to the place where the Great Sanhedrin was located. However, when the Sanhedrin ceased to exist, the sounding of the shofar on Shabbat was discontinued. The shofar says, "Awake, sleepers, from your sleep, and slumberers, arise from your slumber." Mishneh Torah, Laws of Repentance 3-4. Mitzvah. The sages indicated that the mitzvah was to hear the sounds of the shofar. They went so far as to consider a shofar blown into a pit or cave, and to decide whether a person who hears the original sound or the echo has fulfilled the mitzvah. Mishnah. The Shulchan Aruch sums up to that if the hearer hears the reverberation, the mitzvah is not valid. However, if the listener perceives the direct sounds, he fulfills the mitzvah. Thus, most modern halakhic authorities hold that hearing a shofar on the radio or the internet would not be valid to satisfy the mitzvah, because electronically reproduced sounds do not suffice for mitzvot that require hearing a specific natural sound. However, one should consult a competent rabbi if an unusually pressing situation arises, as some authorities believe that performing mitzvot through electronically reproduced sound is preferable to not performing them at all. According to Jewish law, women and minors are exempt from the commandment of hearing the shofar blown, but they are encouraged to attend the ceremony. If the Baal Tekiah blows with the intention that all who hear will perform the mitzvah, then anyone listening, even someone passing by, who intends to hear the shofar can perform the mitzvah, because the community blower blows for everybody. If the listener stands still, it is presumed he intends to hear. If one hears the blast but with no intention of fulfilling the mitzvah, then the mitzvah has not been fulfilled. Qualifications. The expert who blows the shofar is termed the Toki or Baal Tekiah. Being a Baal Tekiah is an honor. Every male Jew is eligible for this sacred office, providing he is acceptable to the congregation. The one who blows the shofar on Rosh Hashanah should likewise be learned in the Torah and shall be God-fearing, the best man available. If a potential choice will cause dissension, he should withdraw his candidacy, even if the improper person will be chosen. The Shulchan Aruch discusses who is fit to blow the shofar on behalf of a congregation. Anyone not obligated to fulfill the mitzvah of sounding the shofar cannot fulfill the commandment for another whose duty it is to perform the mitzvah. Although a woman may not blow the shofar for men, a female Baal Tekiah may intone the shofar for herself and other women. Similarly, she may say a blessing over the mitzvah even though it is not mandatory. Only a freeman can be a Baal Tekiah. The Baal Tekiah shall abstain from anything that may cause ritual contamination for 3 days prior to Rosh Hashanah. Shape and material. Choice of animal. According to the Talmud, a shofar may be made from the horn of any animal from the Bovidae family except that of a cow, although a ram is preferable. Bovidae horns are made of keratin. An antler, on the other hand, is not a horn but solid bone. Antlers cannot be used as a shofar because they cannot be hollowed out. There is no requirement for ritual slaughter, and theoretically, the horn can come from a non-kosher animal because under most interpretations of Jewish law the shofar is not required to be mutar b'fikah. The mitzvah is hearing the shofar, not eating the animal it came from. The shofar falls into the category of tashmas high mitzvah, objects used to perform a mitzvah that do not themselves have inherent holiness. Moreover, because horn is always inedible, it is considered afra alma and not an unkosher substance. The Elev Hamagan delineates the order of preference. 1. Curved ram. 2. Curved other sheep. 3. Curved other animal. 4. Straight, ram or otherwise. 5. Non-kosher animal. 6. Cow. The first 4 categories are used with a bracha, the 5th without a bracha, and the last not at all. A dull sheep with horns. Greater Kudu, Namibia. Construction. In practice 2 species are generally used. The Ashkenazi and Sephardi shofar is made from the horn of a domestic ram, while a Yemeni shofar is made from the horn of a kudu. A Moroccan shofar is a flat shofar with no curves besides the main curve. A crack or hole in the shofar affecting the sound renders it unfit for ceremonial use. A shofar may not be painted in colors, but it may be carved with artistic designs. Shofars are sometimes plaited with silver across part of their length for display purposes, although this invalidates them for use in religious practices. The horn is flattened and shaped by the application of heat, which softens it. A hole is made from the tip of the horn to the natural hollow inside. It is played much like a European brass instrument, with the player blowing through the hole, causing the air column inside to vibrate. Sephardi shofars usually have a carved mouthpiece resembling that of a European trumpet or French horn, but smaller. Ashkenazi shofars do not. Because the hollow of the shofar is irregular in shape, the harmonics obtained when playing the instrument can vary. Rather than a pure perfect fifth, intervals as narrow as a fourth, or as wide as a sixth may be produced. A small shofar made from a ram's horn. A shofar made from the horn of a greater kudu. A small shofar made from a ram's horn. Sounds. Foundations. In Talmud and Torah, the tekiah and teruah sounds mentioned in the Tanakh were respectively bass and treble. The tekiah was a plain deep sound ending abruptly. The teruah, a trill between 2 tekiahs. These 2 sounds, constituting a single unit of shofar sounding, were rendered 3 times during a service added specially for Rosh Hashanah. First in honor of God's kingship, next to recall the binding of Isaac, in order to cause the congregation to be remembered before God, and a third time to comply with the precept regarding the shofar. The word teruah appears 3 times in the Bible in the context of the shofar, from which the Talmud derives the rule that 3 such sounds must be made. In addition, other verses connect the word tekiah to teruah twice, thus leading the Talmud to rule that each teruah must be preceded and followed by a tekiah, leading to a total of 9 blasts. Over time doubts arose as to the correct sound of the teruah. The Talmud is uncertain whether it means a moaning, groaning or a staccato beat sound. A system of 3 sounds was therefore devised to account for all the possibilities. Shevarim is composed of 3 connected short sounds. Teruah is a series of 9 very short notes divided into 3 disconnected or broken sequences of 3 notes each. The 9 notes of the teruah is equal the 3 notes of the shevarim in duration. Tekiah is slightly longer than the length of either the shevarim or the teruah. The doubt as to the nature of the biblical teruah, whether it was simply a broken moan, a staccato or both, necessitates 3 near repetitions to make sure of securing the correct sound. The sequence of the shofar blowing is thus: tekiah, shevarim, teruah, tekiah, tekiah, shevarim, tekiah, tekiah, teruah, and then a final blast of tekiah gedolah, which means big tekiah, held as long as possible. This series is also known by its acronyms. Tashrit, Tashat, Tarat, respectively. When blowing the Shevarim Teruah, the Tekiah is lengthened to be slightly longer than the duration of the Shevarim and the Teruah together. Some opinions require trebling the series based on the mention of Teruah 3 times in connection with the 7th month, and also on the above-mentioned division of the service into Malchiyot, Zikronot, and Shofarit. To fulfill all of the opinions and criteria above, a total of 30 blasts are sounded, the minimum number required today. Tashrit 3 times, yielding 12 blasts. Tashat 3 times, yielding 9. Tarat 3 times, yielding 9. Alternatively, although fewer opinions are satisfied, some communities sound a single series of Tashrit Tashat Tarat without trebling. This may also fulfill the required total of 30 blasts, if Tekiah is counted as one note, Shevarim 3, and Teruah 9. Regardless, all halachic authorities teach that one should follow one's community's custom. Modern practice, it is customary to hear 100 or 101 sounds in the synagogue, although the minimum requirement is to hear 30 sounds. The shofar is sounded just before, during and after the Musaf prayer on Rosh Hashanah. For the sounding just before Musaf, after the Torah reading, irrelevant verses from the Bible are recited, followed by 2 blessings. One on the biblical commandment of hearing the sound of the shofar, and the blessing of Sheheshenu. After that, 30 shofar blasts are sounded. In the Musaf prayer itself, the shofar is sounded 3 times during the silent prayer, and then again 3 times during the leader's repetition. For each of these soundings, 10 appropriate selections from the Bible are recited, followed by a benediction, followed finally by a series of 10 shofar blasts. After leader's repetition of the Musaf prayer is completed, a final series of 10 shofar blasts are sounded, yielding a total of 100 or 101 blasts. After the service is over, it is customary to blow another series of 30 blasts, to confuse the adversary. According to the Sephardic tradition, a full 101 blasts are sounded, corresponding to the 100 cries of the mother of Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army who did not return home after being killed by Yael. One cry is added to symbolize the legitimate love of a mother mourning her son.